And I am alive here on a Friday in February after last night's school board meeting was real crazy. Real crazy experience for me, and that's why I'm late this morning. It's also why I don't have a news segment this morning, but I do have a great conversation with Eric Segall, which I put out to subscribers yesterday. I shared the video with Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/PDominic if you're not there already. And now I'll share the audio of said interview with you. And maybe I'll do more of that if you liked it. I didn't really hear back from everybody saying, I was so happy that you got me that video. I don't know what I was expecting, but, you throw some new things in there every once in a while. See what catches fire, you know what I'm saying? Well, folks, I'll tell you what did catch fire. Last night's board meeting, and we are back having to combat the crazies, as I say, over on Earth 2. We are, whatever you see playing out at school boards across the country, as I've told you many times before, is exactly what we're seeing. Except I would argue in some ways it's even worse. It's even uglier in our situation. We haven't had any violence that I know of, but we've had crimes definitely being committed by making phone calls to Child Protection Services, anonymous calls, claiming that people were abusing their kids, of course, threats against board members and their families, and of course, just the worst things being said. I've been called a pedophile several times. Last night, a woman screamed at me while I was talking during my 3 minutes at the microphone and screamed that you're a child predator. You can't hear it on the audio I'm about to play, but it happened, and I was smart to say what she said into the microphone because people watching that board meeting at home won't hear the audience. You can't hear the audience and all the things they're yelling because they're not mic'd. Only the people speaking and the board are. And so I was sure to put that in there so anybody that didn't hear or wasn't there would hear that. And, well, again, this is about the LGBT community and what they're outraged by are gender-neutral bathrooms or the idea that trans kids who identify as trans could use locker rooms of their gender identity, and people are screaming. They're worried about the safety and security of their kids. And of course, it's something to consider. It's something to think about. It's something to grapple with. And there's a lot of nuance around it, for sure. But nobody wants to have that conversation. They go right to screaming that you're brainwashed, that you're a child predator, that you're a pedophile, that you're a maniac, a lunatic, that you're part of the woke mob. But the bottom line in New York State is it's a law. And more importantly, experts across the spectrum of psychology have taken a look at this and have tried to come up with educators and other experts solutions for these kids who might be struggling or confused or even confident with their gender identity that is different from the one they were born with. And we've come up with some pretty great solutions, and nothing is perfect. And sure, a boy could just pretend to be trans and go in and assault a girl. But that's a crime. It's always been a crime, and it will be treated as a crime, as our superintendent said last night. But I just actually want to play for you a couple of clips from other speakers last night to give you some context of what's going on in Clarkstown, New York. And then I'll play my comments, and then we'll get to my conversation with Eric Segall on today's show. Here's one young man that was at the meeting. He's been leading the charge for the anti-gay, anti-trans movement. I won't say his name, even though it's public. All of this is public. I wouldn't be sharing audio if it wasn't. You can go to our Board of Education website and watch it yourself. But this young man has been leading the charge. He created a club. He worked with Turning Point USA, who he was handing out buttons for yesterday. His mother was screaming. His younger sister was also talking on the microphone later on, an 11-year-old girl who said some pretty wild things herself. But here he is first. I'll just I'll give you a sample of where he was going.
Good evening, Board of Education. I stand before you today not just as a student, but as a voice for the countless students and parents within our community who are deeply concerned about our school's bathroom policies. Before I delve into the specifics, I must raise a fundamental question. How do our board members define a woman? This is not a superficial question, but a critical one that exposes the overlooked complexities in the recent changes to bathroom and locker room policies.
All right. So how does the board define a woman? And that's where he went. And then we heard from some other students with different points of view. I thought this young woman was well-spoken. Here were her concerns.
Good evening, Board of Education. I find myself compelled to stand before you once more, driven by a profound sense of dismay regarding the school's current bathroom and locker room policy. The truth is, I'm filled with apprehension at the thought of using these facilities under existing guidelines. Policies, in my eyes, fail to protect our privacy and safety in spaces where we should feel most secure. The policy, which seems to have been adopted without a thorough consideration of its impact on the student body, leaves many of us feeling exposed and vulnerable.
Just a little of her point of view there. And I just want to say, sometimes I think that our kids, obviously, I think a lot of times our kids get their ideas from us, including my own. But I've tried to be careful to not make my daughters more afraid of things than they have to be. That's something I've thought so seriously about their entire lives. How dangerous is that? Well, it's the edge of a cliff, so probably should be pretty afraid of that. Don't take a selfie there, or it's a pool, or it's alcohol, or it's riding without a helmet, or not looking both ways. Yeah, there are certain things that are real dangers. For God's sake, don't go in the woods. There's murderous clowns in there. But I haven't warned my kids and been concerned about my kids being snatched or kidnapped. That's not something I drove into their minds because I've never known anybody who had that happen to them. And I didn't want them to be more afraid or afraid at all of strangers. I've never bought into stranger danger, never worked for me. I think you should be a lot more concerned about the guy you know really well. But nonetheless, I don't think that I have a hard time believing. I don't want to take a young person's agency. I really don't. But I just have a hard time believing that any of these young people were thinking about this or were concerned about this until it was brought up like 6 weeks ago by their parents. Because we never heard anything. The teachers didn't hear anything. The principals haven't heard anything. The school psychologists, certainly my daughter and their friends hadn't been concerned or heard anything. That's all I've got to say about her comments and how I heard them and the rest of these young people that were sharing that point of view. I had a hard time believing they were really scared or even knew about it before their parents made the hay. All right, and now we've got another student. Again, I'll protect her name, although I hope to release it publicly because I'm on an interview this young woman, talked to her and a friend of hers after who also spoke, who I'll play for you. It's so articulate, so passionate, so courageous, and had to put up with the heckle of adults and high school students, a boy in the back yelling, "You're brainwashed," and they didn't throw him out. How about it?
Good evening. My name is I'm a senior at Clarkstown High School South and the president of my high school's Gay Straight Transgender Alliance. I am here on behalf of my fellow transgender peers to thank the board for passing the Equal Opportunity and Non-Discrimination Policy last month, a decision that is solid proof of your allyship and continued support of LGBTQ+ students in CCSD. Your mission as our Board of Education is to keep Clarkstown students safe and ensure our well-being in school environments. I am very gracious that you uphold your values towards all students regardless of our gender identity. I'm sure most of you recognize my face as I've stood right here in front of you before to share my experiences with transphobia and assert why trans-inclusive gender policy is crucial within our school district. For the last month, I've had conversations with close friends, CCSD staff, and community members about how much good this policy will do, how it's a monumental step towards gender equality in our district, and how I'm elated to know that my underclassmen will have the support that I found missing. I just thought she was so good. I probably should play the rest of it. You know what? I should. No need to return here right in front of you and speak again. Yet it has become increasingly clear that the issue of protecting, supporting, and celebrating LGBTQ+ students is not settled and will continue to be contested by those who fear a misconception. Did you know that I can count the number of transgender girls in our district on one hand?
Huh.
I know this because I have met them. And they're extremely lovely,
being heckled.
And they're extremely lovely and kind-hearted girls who, when they need to touch up their eyeliner or use the toilet, go to the girls' bathroom. Because if they went to the boys' bathroom, their safety would be at risk. Similarly goes for trans boys, because none of the trans boys that I know, who I can count on both hands, use the boys' bathroom because they are terrified of harassment and potential hate crimes. The fearmongers who preach against trans-inclusive gender policies are disgusted and terrified by an imaginary enemy.
Yeah.
The possibility that trans girls are pretending to be trans so they can sneak into girls' bathrooms and sexually assault their classmates. Unfortunately, the reality is that teenage boys don't need to pretend to be girls to sneak into girls' bathrooms. Mm-hmm. It amazes me that this fear of predatory trans girls is so widespread because it tells me that our community believes that their boys are not above stalking girls in bathrooms. These concerned parents are inflaming a systemic issue, the social conditioning of our boys, and oversimplifying it into this multifaceted, complex problem to one viable conclusion: trans women. I refuse to accept the inevitability of news articles and Facebook posts and angry rants spreading misinformation and harassment of my trans sisters while advocating for those who can be here today. I'm asking the board to continue protecting us trans students despite hatred and criticism from others and to show that you support our safety. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, and then you don't even hear. You can't hear. They're not might, but she got a standing ovation, as did they on the other side of the auditorium as well, over and over and over. Totally worth listening to all that. And there's the next student I want to hear from as well. Again, I'm protecting their names, but certainly not their words.
Before I start my speech,
Let her speak, please.
I want to say that we're just kids trying to go to school, and can both sides not heckle each other? It's not necessary.
Let's be respectful and let her speak.
They were going nuts.
Good evening. My name is Orly Herard, and I'm a senior at Clarkstown South. I am here to represent the opinions of a majority of girls within the Clarkstown High School. The female student body was recently made aware that we are supposed to be afraid of an imaginary trans boogeyman following us into the restrooms to harm us. But I and around 240 girls said that we are not afraid. We are not afraid because we grew up with the trans girls attending our schools. They are our classmates, our gym partners, artists, and most importantly, our friends. As a senior, I have used the restroom with a trans girl for 4 years, and there has been no incident where she has harassed a female student. This harmful rhetoric is being championed by the men in our community, and it baffles me that the opinions of people who do not use the female restroom are revered as fact in this unfortunate situation.
She was amazing. And now, unfortunately, just to give you the sense of what we're dealing with and a balanced way to think about it, I do want to play for you the townspeople, the holders of the pitchforks, the modern day fascists, the town bigots so filled with fear, misinformation, and a general lack of understanding that they would say things like this fella.
My name is Sandy Chait, and I'm a concerned New City taxpayer. And I'm only addressing this to the five. We know the five. You're all child abusers. You prey upon impressionable children and indoctrinate them into your insane ideology.
The five is the 5 board members who support this policy. And that was probably the most shocking moment of the night. The board members, you could see their faces. It was not easy, but here he is.
Ideological cult. A cult which holds many fanatical views, but none so deranged as boys being girls and girls being boys. Never in recorded history has a single society ever accepted or practiced this. Until 10 minutes ago.
Well, I'd like to introduce you to my Greek and Roman friend, Sandy.
There are 2 types of gametes, male and female, 2 genders. Not 3, not 100, not 1,000, not non-binary, not neutral.
None of that. Okay. Loud and clear.
I doubt a single one of you can tell me how many genders there are. I doubt a single one of you can define what a man or a woman is. It sounds like dark humor, like a satirical farce. Sadly, it's not. Plenty of things in life call for both sides to be considered, but not all. If there was a school board meeting calling for reintroducing slavery, I'd like to think this room would be SRO. If class curriculums mandated students adopt the notion that gravity doesn't exist or water isn't wet, I'd assume there would be an outrage to push against those members of office. Believing you're a cat, a tooth fairy, or that there are more than 2 genders and that those genders can just summarily change is the same thing. Coddling, compassion, social contagion, declaring victim status or feelings are subjective and cannot abrogate objective reality. A boy claiming to be a girl is no more true than me claiming I'm 15 years old.
Well, you're acting like it.
It's fine for people to believe whatever they want, but forcing delusion and untruths on others is not okay. Appeasement is never the answer. It never helps the victim. And the victims here are those who have fantasies foisted upon them. By imposing this vile nonsense on students who are young girls are forced to share their locker room with boys, you deprive them of safety and privacy. But for something even more fundamental, truth. If education is not grounded in truth, then it is rendered worthless. More so, it's poison. You are poison. You are child predators. You hide.
Time.
Time's up, buddy. Sorry. Oh, he's still talking. He is still going, but
Your
the mic
time
is off.
up.
And the mic is off. Sorry, but oh, yeah. There you go. Sandy Chait. Well done. Well done, pal. Strong showing. All right. Well, I'm just now going to play my comments at the board last night, and that will give you a lot more context. I'll also share the link to the board meeting if anybody wants to actually watch the whole thing and get the full context. But probably around 15 adults spoke at the microphones, probably around, 6 to 8 young people, and the comments last about an hour. Everybody gets 3 minutes. I took all 3 minutes of mine. Let's fucking go. Can I wait till it's quiet?
The clock starts when you start talking.
My name is Pete Dominic. I live in Congers. Moved here 17 years ago. Raised both of my daughters here. My older daughter graduated from Clarkstown North last year. She's a first-year student at a great college because of the education that she got here. My younger daughter is currently a student at North. She's thriving here because of the teachers and staff, administrators, and this board. Neither of my girls has ever been concerned about what's happening in the bathrooms or the locker rooms. Neither of my girls has ever felt their privacy at Lakewood, Felix Vesta, or North was in danger. They never worried about kids who identified as gay or trans. If anything, my daughters worry about them and for them because they are in danger, not my kids. My kids weren't scared because there was nothing to be scared of. This isn't about bathrooms or safety. This is about dividing the community over a false narrative in order to elect new people to this board. It's all made up. The entire controversy isn't a controversy at all. Take the time to ask your teachers, your parents, kids. Call the principal. That's what I did. I asked dozens of teachers, administrators, friends of my daughters. None of them had any idea or concerns about this trans kids in the bathrooms until it was manufactured by the same people that always do this. We can rant and rave about things that could happen, or we could focus on the reality of what is happening. Every year, I've just been called a child predator. I've been called a child predator. I've been called a pedophile. I've had the police calling me with false narratives and accusations because I care about students that aren't mine. They aren't my kids. Every year at this time for the past 5 years, a new fake controversy is posted by the same exact people on Facebook. They bring into the microphones these meetings in order to divide the community in preparation for a school board election. If you live here and pay attention at all, you can expect the same playbook from the same hacks and cowards every year. Set your clock to it. Here's their game plan. First, manufacture controversy in our school district. Just make it up, mislead, savage the reputations of good teachers, call them child predators, administrators, and of course the board members. Next, and most audaciously, make the victims the aggressors. Somehow convince the community that the most vulnerable kids are rampaging over the rest of our kids' safety and security. Last year it was black kids were attacking white kids because they supported Trump. They screamed it right here. Not even remotely true. This year, the big, bad, scary gay and trans kids are attacking straight kids in the locker rooms they rant and rave. Also not a thing. Next year, maybe they'll target kids with physical disabilities and spread fear that they're going to attack the strong athletes. That's the playbook. Attack vulnerable people and families and demonize them, creating us verse-then binary so they can win seats at the board and ban books that hurt their feelings. To all of the LGBT kids who are here, we see you, we love you, we support you. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Yep. Get after it. Time to stand up. There it was, and that's where I left it, and I felt, of course, nervous and scared because there are violent elements in this community that I worry about, and I worry about my family's safety and security, but I've always been motivated by Dr. King's words and the words of so many other civil rights heroes, including those who gave their lives for the movement. This simple idea that the ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, so it's not those people. in the auditorium that were screaming and calling us names, but it was, as he said, the silence over that by the good people. That's the ultimate tragedy. In the end, we're remembered not for the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And I, for that reason, won't be silent. I'm not asking anybody else to go to those microphones or make those posts, but I, for one, I can't. I want to be one of the good people that Dr. King talked about. I want to get into the good trouble that John Lewis told us to, asked us to. I don't want to just talk the talk. I want to walk the walk. The great Joe Madison, who we just lost. Most of us never thought that we would be here. Some of you did. But just because we weren't expecting to be here in our lives doesn't mean we also aren't the ones we've been waiting for. Never too late to stand up, especially when it seems like the curtain's coming down. Thanks very much for listening to that, for supporting me in my work, and for teaching me. I follow so many of your guidance and your moral clarity, and I look forward to meeting all of you in Vegas. Come on, March 22nd, 23rd. Had to plug it. All right, now let's catch up with Professor Eric Segall, who I called right after the oral arguments at yesterday's Supreme Court hearing wrapped, and he, like everybody else, smart, agrees that the Supreme Court is not going to knock Donald Trump off the ballot. Here he is from Georgia State University. The Supreme Myths Podcast. Get his books, follow him on social media, all that in the show link. Let's do it with Eric Segall. There he is. Professor Segall, you watched, or I should say, listen.
I wish I had watched it. We all should be watching it, but no, of course I listened to it. Yes.
Walked right into there should be cameras in the courtroom argument you've been making since I met you. Do you want to make a point about that? Why that would have
of course. It's our Supreme Court. It's our president. It's the state of Colorado disqualifying it. C-SPAN is willing to televise it at C-SPAN's expense. It is a public hearing open to the public. 200 members of the public get to go. It should be on TV. It's an obvious thing. Enough's enough.
Well, then the justices would become that much more performative. And the lawyers it would make it all a charade, just like these congressional hearings we see.
I don't think the Supreme Court can be more performative than it already is. No, I don't. Right. Pete, let me just give you the best example of that. Did you notice, this will be the Segall take. No one else was going to say this except for me today. Did you notice the one question that was not asked? Nobody. 9 justices, what was it, 2 hours of argument, not 1 minute of discussion on whether it is a good or a bad thing for Donald Trump to be disqualified. Like, we're talking about everything else except, is it a good thing for Donald Trump to be disqualified? Which honestly is really going to be the only question. Should be the only question.
A good thing for who? And who should be asking that question?
Well, I mean, for the country. I mean, should we have a system like this where a person who does what Trump did gets to be president is the question in this case. And this is a problem with constitutional law. We talk around it. We talk through it. We talk under it and over it. But you and I both know that, leaving aside partisan kind of feelings, all 9 justices are thinking to themselves, what's the best answer? Should Trump be disqualified or not? That's the question. But no one asked that question. It's an amazing thing.
Well, let's maybe shelve that for just a minute, because I want to start back. Just the other big question a lot of people are asking, or people are very upset about, is that Clarence Thomas was there today.
Yeah, I tweeted about that. Of course. So Clarence Thomas's wife contacted Arizona authorities to try to get them to not count the real votes. She had text messages with the chief of staff for Donald Trump trying to stop the election. His wife has a very substantial interest in Donald Trump being president again, both financial and personal, because the Heritage Foundation supplies employees to Republican administrations, and she is affiliated with that. He should not have been there, but of course we would not expect him to do the right thing anyway.
All right, so he was there, and we heard the arguments, and we can get into all of it, but I kind of just want to fast forward to the most important thing. Your analysis about this, along with a lot of other people, was the outcome was and has been what, before we even get the arguments, that the decision will come out that Trump does get to remain on the ballot, and you can explain why, but you're pretty certain that they were going to decide that after hearing the arguments. Have you changed your mind at all?
No, not at all.
Okay.
In fact, it's even more clear now.
Okay.
First, it was just, I mean, a lot of people have been saying that. There were some liberal, progressive dissenters, hopefuls, you know, and I'm talking about serious people. Lawrence Tribe of Harvard Law School, Judge Ludwig, who used to be a big conservative judge. Of course, the two law professors who wrote that 126-page opus saying Trump is disqualified now, even before any court hearings.
Right.
But they were outliers. Most of us knew the court wasn't going to do this. But what I will say, it became very clear today, is that Justice Kagan is not going to vote to disqualify. And we kind of thought that was the case, but now we're very sure of that. And I'm not even sure Jackson will. I think it's going to be 8-1. That's what I've been saying all along, with Sotomayor dissenting. But what it seems to be the case, Pete, is that they're going to say that states, at least in the absence of congressional authorization, states do not have the power to disqualify or take someone off the ballot to be president. Now, that's interesting. And that's what most of them said. Like, they all harped on that. They said that. What's interesting about that, you know, you want to contrast that with Dobbs for a minute, you know, states' rights, states' rights, states' rights, but not today.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and just to be clear, in this case, it's Colorado. It's Trump versus Anderson. Yeah. And Anderson is the plaintiff who took it to the Supreme Court of Colorado. And so when you say states shouldn't be allowed, as what they're arguing, it was the Colorado Supreme Court in this case that took them off, and they shouldn't be allowed. The court that state or any state should not be allowed. That's
what I think 7 of the 9 justices suggested today, including Justice Kagan. Justice Jackson had a very interesting take, Pete, that, you know, it's really simple and it's really clean and it sounds stupid, but I'm not sure she's wrong. She says Section 3 doesn't list the president as someone who is covered by, or the vice president, as people who are covered by Section 3. Now, you know, the argument is, but of course they didn't want Robert E. Lee to be president, and of course they had the president in mind when they wrote this. I think those are fair responses, Pete. But here's then what Jackson didn't say today, and I would have said. If I'd been Justice Jackson and that was the answer, which it was, I would have said, but wait a minute. We can only go by what they actually said when what they said is clear. If what they say is unclear, then judges have to, you know, interpret. But here, they listed everybody and didn't list the president. If they wanted the president to be included, they wrote the amendment wrong. That's what I would have said. And that's not a frivolous argument. Think about it. They list members of Congress. They list the Senate. They don't list the president or vice president. Why not? Because everybody thought they would be covered. It's not a good reason. It's not a good reason. Put them in anyway. Really interesting arguments around what you know, in response to what you heard today. But what else did you hear today that it all surprised you by any of the justices or the lawyers arguing? I mean, I'm trying to read social media with all the experts that I, you know, follow during this. It's real fascinating. And I can't. And I was listening to some of the arguments, which I normally don't do. But you told me, Segall said, this is one of the most important decisions the court will ever take up. So I thought, well, maybe I'll tune in for this one. So what else? Other top line reactions? This is for budding lawyers in the audience or anyone who might think about being a lawyer. The lawyer who argued for Donald Trump, Jonathan Mitchell, who's the guy who wrote that heinous Texas law about abortion, about civil lawsuits against women, doctors do abortions. He's also a Scalia law clerk. He conceded a lot in his oral argument. Nothing that killed him, but conceded enough to show that he was being reasonable. That's a good lawyer today, Pete, because you don't want to stand up there defending Donald Trump in an insurrection case and be unreasonable. So, for example, there's a lawyer named Carvin who argued a lot of the Obamacare case, famous Supreme Court advocate. He never gave an inch ever. He was just a bully, never gave an inch, was always unreasonable. This guy today was very reasonable. I didn't expect that. I think a lot of people didn't expect that because he's a true believer. That's one observation. Another observation is really there wasn't a lot of discussion about the original meaning of Section 3. There was some, but there wasn't as much as you'd expect from a court that claims to be an originalist court. Third, I have sympathy, Pete, and this is going to get your audience mad at me, but I have sympathy for the consequentialist arguments made today. By that, I mean the pragmatic, prudential arguments, not text, history, precedent. The strongest of which is Can we really have 50 different states having different procedures on whether or not a national officer, the president, is disqualified? That feels unwieldy. Now, it's true the Supreme Court sits on top of that, but still, whether something is an insurrection is so fact-dependent. How are we going to have the court reviewing 27 different courts doing 27 different findings of fact? I have to say the president is the one officer in this country who is on duty 24/7, who theoretically every state votes for and so on. And I really do think having different state procedures to answer such a complicated question is problematic. I applaud the justices, the conservative ones and the liberal ones, for raising this issue. I wish they had raised it and then said, we know this isn't text, we know this isn't history, we know this isn't precedent, but it's still important. Because it is important. That's how they're going to decide the case. And Steve Vladeck thinks that. I saw his tweet. A bunch of fairly well-known.
That's what they're going to rest on. The point you just made about the different states. Are we really going to? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And I have to say, Pete, let's take away Segall's biases, which is, of course, being a very critical person of the Supreme Court his entire career. Take away Segall's, all of his books and writings and all the stuff that makes me a Supreme Court critic. Just look at it from a very common sense perspective. Should the president be disqualified or not from running for office again, a former president? It feels like that should be a political question made by political officials, not a legal question made by judges. It just feels that way.
Right. It feels that way.
Yeah. And you know what? People should, and I want to be very clear about something. I apologize for not being clear before in yours and mine previous discussions on this. I want to be this is the clearest thing I ever want to say talking to you and on your show. People should vote against Donald Trump because he engaged in an insurrection. I mean, there are 1,000 reasons to vote against him, but it is absolutely valid, and I hope happens, that people vote against this thug because he encouraged, incited, and probably, to my mind, participated in an insurrection against the United States. So vote against him for that reason. Please.
I feel like, and I would only add, and I wonder about this, and how much it changed people's minds at all. The insurrection only could occur because of the big lie that he won the election.
Yes.
And he told that lie before the election, that if he lost, it would be because it was rigged. And he told it over and over and over. And he's always told that about anything he's ever lost, even, a beauty pageant.
Yes.
And I feel like for that reason, for not conceding to the outcome of a legitimate election, that alone should change people's minds, because we're talking about democracy. And of course, then he leads to the insurrection. But I always like that insurrection. I always have compassion for people who believe a thing and take action.
Sure.
And I think a lot of the people believed Donald Trump. He was the president of the United States. He's got access to all the top everything. But I just wonder about that. Once he started lying, I mean, you can't have any elections in any town, state, or government if.
Yeah, Pete, that's a great point. And that's a great point. And I wish more people would realize, I'm talking about moderates or conservatives now, because liberals realize this, but I wish more moderates and conservatives would realize that his questioning the election, just his questioning of it, it's fair to file a lawsuit, Pete. That happens all the time. It's fair to challenge an election in court, and that happens all the time. It is not fair for the president of the United States to completely try to convince the American people the election was rigged. That's an incredibly dangerous thing standing by itself. And it's why Al Gore didn't do that in 2000 when he could have said the court is rigged. We know there's 5 Republicans, and of course they're going to do this. But you're right. People should vote against Trump for that reason, among 1,000 other reasons.
All right. Is there anything else to say about today's hearings? I know you don't have a lot of time. I got to let you go.
Yeah, I apologize. I got to do a TV thing at 1.
Oh, good.
I guess the last.
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you this.
Yes.
Did you see in the consensus of your colleagues and legal scholars a lot of dissent to what you're telling me or is there a lot of consensus about what everybody heard today in terms of what the outcome is going to be or et cetera, and everything else we talked about?
So it's 12:46. The arguments ended at 12:25, I think. And I've been checking Twitter before you and I started talking. Mm-hmm. The overwhelming consensus seems to be they're going to rule that states can't disqualify federal officers like the president, absent at least a congressional statute. And by the way, Peter, I know people are mad at me for this, but I think that's the right decision.
Right. Yeah. Well, right or wrong, that's what it's going to be.
I think so. I think that's correct. So I've been saying, and now I'm going to say something to the audience. I have been saying for months and months, off air and on air and on my podcast and every place else, that Democrats and liberals and progressives and anyone who doesn't want to see Trump reelected need to think about a plan B to the disqualification plan. And I have a plan for that a lot of people don't agree with, so that's fine. But whatever it is, we need a plan B. And plan B has kind of been put off pending this Supreme Court argument. And that was a huge mistake. We should have had a plan B 3 months ago. And I don't think Democrats do have a plan B today. And they should have a plan B today.
Such as?
Well, you don't want to hear because you don't agree with me.
About
too late. My plan B is too late anyway.
Not on the. I thought you. Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you meant
a reasonable plan B might be for Biden to hold a national press conference one of these days. I guess he can't do that, can he? I don't know. We need a plan B. Smarter heads than me need to think about a plan B because this is never going to work.
Well, there few are smarter heads than you, so we appreciate your head joining us in that little box. And so I don't know. Sorry if my camera is having difficulties.
No worries. It's probably my image causing difficulties. Thank you, Pete.
Thanks for your image. Yeah. All right, buddy. Have a good rest of your day, and thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, there he goes, Eric Segall. Go find him. Go listen to his podcast, Supreme Myths. Go follow him on TikTok and Twitter and everything else. And I am so grateful that you listened to today's show. I'm sorry I didn't get to the news. It's because I was at the Board of Education meeting, being threatened and called a sexual predator. Oh, yeah. Hope you like my new song. That's going to end the show today. Just today. Tomorrow we'll get back at it. As a matter of fact, John Carroll, take us out right now. What am I doing?
Oh, you better stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. Let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw the land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge a voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Oh, got to stand